If you are a Solana holder, you're going to want to watch this video because I believe today materially changes the direction of the Solana ecosystem. I'm going to discuss what's going on with Solana, why some of the recent ecosystem growth may be under threat, and why the token could potentially be under threat, at least in the short to midterm. And I'm going to give you my take on what I'm doing with my Solana holdings, what I'm focusing on in the market. This video isn't to FUD Solana. I still hold a lot of Solana, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a major discussion to be had here. And I believe that if you're interested in holding Solana, trading Solana, or even interested in Ethereum, this video is really going to matter for you to help you understand the dynamics at play. So if you do enjoy videos like this, where I keep you up to date with the market, make sure you smash the like button and click the subscribe button so you can stay in tune with the market. Because today I have a big market update, lots of news, especially on the Solana front, breaking overnight. Firstly, I'm going to start with my market thoughts pertaining to Bitcoin and what my general strategy is. Then we're going to get into a Sol-specific discussion, and I'll give my thoughts on that side. Just looking at the Bitcoin chart right now, if you watched the stream that I did with Paradise yesterday, you'll note that we discussed the fact that we are on the weekly and monthly time frame into resistance at the moment. Remember the thing with resistance is resistance until proven otherwise, and it's no different right now. We do have a couple of scenarios at play at the moment. Paradise points out the importance of reclaiming 106, potentially looking for a move to 110k, play as a range until proven otherwise. Scenario number 2, running the local liquidity pocket at 103 to 103.5 and looking for a short-term reversal into 106. And 3, and this is the scenario that I think could happen, is running the high time frame liquidity pocket into 100k, into the weekly fair value gap, and then targeting a move to 110k to all-time highs afterwards. So to kind of summarize where I sit with the market at the moment, I think we're waiting for two things. We're waiting for either a definitive breakout to the upside, and if you want to look at the weekly, that's the 110k level of all-time high, or we're looking for a 100k sweep to the downside, filling that fair value gap before we can go to the upside. And until there is major resolution on either sides of the coin, I'm not materially adding significant amounts to my long-term spot altcoin portfolio. If we do come back down to 100k, I then become very interested in bidding the strongest altcoins which align on the high time frame with that potential 100k pullback on Bitcoin. So that is one scenario I have. The other scenario I have is on a breakout of 110k, then I'm going to look for long continuation plays on the strongest altcoins in the market. Towards the end of this video, after we discuss Solana, I'll talk about some of the ecosystems and altcoins that I am seeing liquidity already starting to rotate to. I think if we saw a bigger move past 110k, these would be the coins that receive the biggest rotations because we're already seeing early signs of that being the case. But until proven otherwise, we're waiting for, just to recap, a 100k sweep or a definitive breakout above 110k. But in the meantime, I am doing a bit of low time frame trading because there are lots of opportunities happening in the ETH ecosystem, in the DeFi ecosystem, underneath the stablecoin narrative, looking at the ETH beta plays. I think there are plenty of low time frame opportunities to get involved. I'm going to talk about later my plan with Syrup. This is an RWA coin I posted about in the Discord. This has been a nice trade. There's plenty to do on the Hyperliquid front, and there's also some other stablecoin / ETH beta plays that I am interested in on the lower time frame that don't rely on a big Bitcoin breakout for you to make a bit of money in the short term. But these aren't big positions. These aren't big material changes to my long-term spot portfolio. These are more so opportunities on the lower time frame as long as Bitcoin holds above 100k. That's simple for now. But the big discussion today is Solana. So let's get into what is happening with Solana. Now, the reason why this has been such a contentious discussion on X today and has led people to ask whether there's going to be a rotation out of Solana, is Solana dead? I mean, we've heard that many times, so you already know what my answer is there. But there is a genuine discussion to be had around a rotation out of Sol, and that is because of this. News broke that PumpFun is finally raising money, a $1 billion raise at a potential $4 billion valuation to launch its own token. Now, we knew for some time that a Pump token was coming, and this is something I previously spoke about, but today it basically becomes official with this announcement, and I have a lot to say about this announcement, and I also have some trades that I think open up because of the mindshare that this is now starting to garner. Adam Cochran, of course, chimed in here, responding to this announcement by saying, "That's how you know the meme coin trench narrative is finally dead. They infinite extracted on fees, said they wouldn't do a token. Then when fees dry up, they're trying to do a massive token sale to exit." And to be honest, this is what the optics look like. You do have fees almost at all-time lows for PumpFun, and then as soon as the fees dry up, now all of a sudden they're raising $1 billion. So in my opinion, it does seem slightly extractionary, and I wouldn't say this if they raised 100 million, and I probably wouldn't have said it if they didn't make $700 million in fees, but the fact is they made $738 million in fees, and now they're raising another $1 billion. Don't you think that they have enough money to build, what, a chain, an L1, a DEX? $700 million in fees is enough to do that. This, to me, looks like them wanting to extract some money. And look, if you're the founder of a protocol, I guess that's fine. I guess that's your own prerogative, but I'm just saying that's what the optics look like here. It probably would have looked a bit different if they had raised money a couple of months ago when Pump was super hot. They probably could have raised at an even higher valuation, maybe even 10 billion, because at the time fees were going crazy. But I think optics wise, this is a bad look for PumpFun, and it's, raised a lot of questions about PumpFun itself. You see Chamath posting here, or Chamath's intern, the problem with the $750 million pump ICO is that all the smart money that made money from meme coins is either one, already in the venture round, or two, knows the game is bleeding towards zero. And you can see that these venture investors got in at quite a nice price. Now, just to caveat this, a lot of the big VCs actually missed this, but the smaller VCs who invested got in at 12 million, 100 million, and 250. So if they launched at a $4 billion valuation, they're also getting a nice exit. And one of the big questions that's been raised, which I'll touch on in a minute here, is the question of whether PumpFun holders are actually going to get some access to the revenue generation of the platform, considering they already made $738 million fees. You'd think that they'd be entitled to something, at least via ecosystem incentives, and at the very least, access to future fees. But there has been conflicting reports as to whether PumpFun will actually do this. So this leads me into a bigger section here where I'm going to break down all of my thoughts. So I'm going to break down what I think this means for Pump itself, just my rough thoughts on that. And then I'm going to get into probably what will affect you more if you hold Solana or Ethereum or are trading actively in the markets, some of the second order effects of the PumpFun token launch. Firstly, let's start with Pump itself. As I said before, I think they launched too late, and I think this affects the optics and the sentiment as fees are low at the time they're raising $1 billion. Once again, I don't think they need to raise $1 billion, but they are. They made $738 million in fees. If some of this isn't distributed back to the ecosystem incentives, I don't know what to say. It kind of feels like the antithesis of Hyperliquid on face value, but benefit of the doubt until we get more details on tokenomics. Last point on Pump, they don't need to raise $1 billion in my opinion. They already have 700 million, massive overkill and clearly opportunistic. Now let's get into the second order effects. In my opinion, it has a negative impact on Solana, at least in the short term, as there'll be some rotation into Pump once it launches. So you have to remember, one of the key bases for the huge pump that Solana experienced was the fact that it was accruing all this revenue generation off the PumpFun meme coin casino. And Solana, in many ways, for a variety of reasons, but in a major way, was the investable proxy token to the upside of PumpFun. But if PumpFun is going to be launching their own token, then all of a sudden, the reason why a contingent of the market bought Solana will now no longer have a reason to buy Sol. Instead, they'll just buy Pump. And that's where there's an argument of a rotation happening from people that hold Solana into the PumpFun token directly. Now, not everyone, obviously. In fact, the majority of people that invest in Sol aren't just doing it to capture PumpFun's upside, but it is definitely a major factor and was a major catalyst for Solana's huge run. So it makes sense for some of the relative strength to ease off the back of this token coming to market because there will be some sort of rotation. However, I think, as is often the case in crypto, the actual rotationary effect for the Solana token won't happen after the Pump token launches. I think traders will rotate ahead of time. So instead of waiting for Pump to launch, if anyone wants to rotate out of Solana or lower their Solana weightings, they'll probably do so ahead of time as opposed to waiting, which in my opinion makes it a buy the rumor, sell the news event. So you actually might see more weakness on Solana in the short to midterm off the back of people rotating than when this actual launch happens, let's say, in weeks or likely months' time. Now, as a result, I think there's a genuine chance, we're going to look at these charts in a minute here because I want to build a case around this, that the Solana ETH chart continues bleeding. ETH has some positive catalysts like the potential staking ETF, and Solana has some headwinds like the launch of Pump. I think there's a genuine argument that this could continue exacerbating, and I do want to discuss that because that does factor into where I'm parking my liquidity. I also think this could be a good thing for some of the alt L1s. Think Sui, think other major alternative layer ones that maybe have been weak because Sol sucked up the majority of the liquidity. Now that hype has died down, I think it opens up the door for these L1s to perform well. Hype as well is another one of those layer ones which is gaining a lot of attention. And you know what? Arguably, this could be a good thing for the market. Look, I made a lot of money on Solana. It was one of my best trades. I've been very public about the fact I got entries at $11, $14, $21 to $22. So, I've done very well off Solana, and I've been a big Solana bull. And long term, I still am a Solana bull, by the way. However, in the shorter term, if ETH does have a bit of a run versus Solana, and there is some liquidity which goes into the Ethereum ecosystem and ETH L2s, I think overall, this would be a good thing for the market because Solana as an ecosystem tends to be quite PvP. It tends to be very rotationary, like the rotations happen super quickly, whereas the Ethereum ecosystem, there seems to be a bit more of a direct wealth effect. And because there are more utility protocols on Ethereum, and because gas fees are slightly higher, and because it's a bit more of a sophisticated chain in terms of its user base, it doesn't seem to have these super quick, fickle rotations. When rotations happen on ETH, they tend to last a little bit longer and tend to be a bit bigger. So overall, I think it's a good thing for the market if the Ethereum protocols see some love because they have been struggling versus Solana for quite some time. Now on Solana itself, I'm still not bearish long term. I think it's proven its product market fit. I mean, the very fact PumpFun launched and gained traction on Solana shows how strong of an ecosystem it is. There are so many amazing builders on Solana. So in terms of a long-term play, still in my portfolio, but it does change my mindset in the short to mid-term, and I will show you the charts in a minute here, which are going to break down some of my concrete plans as it pertains to Solana and Solana ETH chart, because that is a very important chart at the moment. I just want to touch on one thing before I get into that, though. There's been this big debate as to whether PumpFun is good for crypto or bad for crypto. I know most people think it's bad for crypto, but I just want to come out on the show and give my opinion here. Although it's very good for making money, I've made money off the PumpFun ecosystem at times. Probably you have at times as well. Many great protocols have also launched on PumpFun. You can definitely make money on it if you are skilled, and you can still make money on PumpFun if you're skilled. But if the question is it good or bad for crypto? I've got to say here, net, it's bad for crypto, period. Because here's the reality. Most people aren't trenching. Most people just buy and hold crypto. Most people just buy crypto on centralized exchanges. So if you look at the aggregate amount of people that have been negatively affected by PumpFun, it vastly outweighs the amount of people that have made money on PumpFun, because most people just buy and hold and have felt the adverse effects of PumpFun through additional altcoin dilution, because now it's really easy to launch an altcoin, faster rotations because it's kind of ruins people's attention span. Everyone's just hopping from meme to meme to meme. People getting burnt in PumpFun and not coming back to crypto. So even if, bigger alts are still amazing, they won't come back onto Binance and buy those bigger alts because they've been wrecked in PumpFun, and then they get this negative synergy with crypto. They think, crypto's bad because I got wrecked on PumpFun, and then they leave, which lowers the retail contingent in the market, which lowers the amount of liquidity going into alts. And also a lot of the exchanges are at fault too, because they launched a lot of these predatory tokens. And what would happen is a lot of the insiders would accumulate on PumpFun, then it would get a big exchange listing, and they would start shorting the perp as soon as it got a listing on Binance, whilst dumping the huge spot bags that they accumulated, driving price down on the perp exchange, printing on their perp positions, whilst benefiting from basically the collapse of the token that they pumped. And this happened many times, probably dozens of times on centralized exchanges for meme coins and some of the altcoins that launched on PumpFun too. So overall, if we're going to answer the question, is it good for crypto or bad for crypto? PumpFun was bad for crypto net. Did I make money off it? Did some of you make money off it? I'm sure at times we did. But overall, if you're asking the question, balance of probabilities, was it negative for crypto? Undoubtedly, it's a resounding yes. Now let's get into my detailed thoughts on the impact on Solana. I think a good place to start is actually looking at the Solana chart. Look, it looks a bit weak. Technically, it is approaching some sort of support here on the money noodle band on the weekly. If you want to look at the daily, though, it paints a bit of a different story. It's actually, maintained structure fairly well. It flipped, reversed, held back above the noodle, but is now starting to break below again. You're getting bearish consolidation as well. In my opinion, on the low time frames, looks a little bit weak and does, in my opinion, looks like it wants to sweep a little bit lower. That's just what I'm seeing on the lower time frames. Now, if you want to zoom out slightly back to the 3-day or the weekly, we know that there's a key level at $120. This is still a level that on Solana I would add to my long-term position. So if this PumpFun FUD is going to cause a bit of a rotation out of Solana, I would happily be a bidder in the $120 to $130 region. I just don't think I would be a bidder at these levels because it's not a very attractive risk reward in my opinion. It's kind of in no man's land. I would actually prefer to see a bit of a Solana pump, see some strength off the back of this, and then, if I want to, get back in, I would get back in with bigger size. To give you an update on my Solana position, I have less Solana than I used to, but this isn't just today. This has been the case for a few months. I've slowly kind of chipped away at my Solana, either gone into stables, other protocols, so naturally my weightings come down a little bit. I still have a pretty big bag that I'm holding for the long term, but in the shorter term, I actually have been rotating even further into the ETH ecosystem. I do think Sol ETH, although it's support right now, is prone to a breakdown. I'll show you that chart in a second. And for that reason, I'm just a little bit on edge about my shorter term Solana positions. Although, once again, not fudding the long-term prospects of one of the chains that's found, true product market fit in crypto. Looking at Altcoin as well, one of the major meme coin proxies or high beta risk on plays for Solana, you can see this has also started to break down. Honestly, if this had a big wick to the downside or had continued weakness, this is something I'd buy because it was quite strong for a long time. But this is starting to reverse now. And because we've had such a resounding flip of the daily money noodle, I probably wouldn't be longing this here because this, once again, like Solana, has flipped from bullish momentum into bearish momentum. And that is just what I'm seeing on the charts. Now, let's talk about Solana Ethereum. This was a big breakout, which resulted in a lot of Ethereum holders rotating into Solana, but we are finally coming down to test that key breakout level that we first broke out of in October 2024. This is a retest of that zone. So yes, this could be max FUD at support for Sol. So often do we see max FUD at support, and we could see a little bit of a bounce. However, things are looking structurally weak. It has broken the momentum indicator on the weekly. If you want to look at the daily as well, it has also broken momentum and lower time frame structure. So I am a little bit wary, and I kind of have a feeling here, even though it's at support, we may actually see this level break. And if this level breaks, we could see a bigger rotation into ETH and the ETH ecosystem. And then your next support level is around this zone here at the 4-5 level. And look, that only takes us back to mid last year. We all knew at some point Ethereum would run versus Solana, but maybe now is that time. Look, once again, until it actually confirms below this level, then there is no need to panic if you're a Sol holder, but definitely keep your eye on this, because if you start getting a close below in the weekly, maybe consider shifting some into ETH. You can always switch it back. Good thing is this market, Sol Ethereum, has a spot market on Binance, so you don't need to pay crazy funding to keep pair trades open. I've already preemptively shifted a little bit. I didn't just do this today. I've been doing this over the past few weeks, but definitely keep your eye on this. And also what you got to keep your eye on is if Solana actually does break down versus Ethereum, the ETH ecosystem could be a big beneficiary. And in a couple of minutes here, I'm going to give you some of the altcoins, the DeFi coins, the stablecoin protocol coins that I'm looking into that I think could be big beneficiaries of this rotation. So that whenever there's a loser in the market, there is a winner. This isn't a zero-sum game. And then there's one more chart, which I just thought I'd put this in for a bit of I guess, I don't know, Solana, I guess it's just Solana bear posting, but I just thought I'd point out the similarities here between the Sol BTC chart at the moment and the ETH BTC chart. ETH BTC came down to a key support level and then bounced, as we've seen over the last week. Let me put in a horizontal array here. And currently, we're also seeing the Solana BTC chart starting to make its way down towards this level. Now, I don't know if it's going to play out the full way like ETH BTC did. It would be pretty devastating for Solana if it actually did come down here, but it does look pretty similar in terms of the fractal. And if you want to make that clear, you could just like drag this chart over and look at how similar, look how ETH is like, was at a similar point to where Solana is now. It looks very similar in terms of a fractal. I'm not going to lie to you, so just pay attention to the fact Solana Bitcoin looks very, very weak at the moment. I'm just stating the facts here. It's not actual FUD, it's actual facts. It just looks weak, and it does look like the same fractal on ETH BTC. So that's something I'm also mindful of. So obviously, in light of this, something I've been doing over the past week or so, a bit longer actually, but especially over the last week, is focusing on the ETH plays and some of the Altair 1 plays I won't get into today, but specifically I want to get into some of the ETH plays. I've done previous shows on this, so you may be aware of some of the coins I've spoken about, but I'll reiterate. We're having an ETH BTC reversal. It still looks good. The ETH USD chart also looks pretty good. The ETH Sol chart looks good and looks like it's about to break down. So at least on the charts, we are starting to see a bit of movement in this department finally. Now, look, I still don't want to get my hopes up too much because it seems like every single time ETH BTC pumps, it ends up reversing. But I must say it is encouraging. And for that reason, as I mentioned before, on the lower timeframes, whenever I'm looking at trading something, I'm going to favor these hotter ETH beta protocols a little bit. That's on the low timeframes. On the high timeframes, coincidentally, a lot of the altcoins that I'm looking to add on big dips are also in this ecosystem. Because I think, since a lot of these charts are happening on the weekly, ETH BTC, and since Sol ETH breakdown is also happening on the weekly, I think this could play out in the longer term too, not just in the shorter term. One thing that I think you should be paying attention to is the Circle IPO. I discussed this on yesterday's video, but basically with Circle IPOing, I think this is a potential catalyst for stablecoin protocols, many of which are on Ethereum, because it raises the potential valuation floor and ceiling for these altcoins if it does IPO at a decent valuation. And I think they're targeting a $7 billion valuation, which is quite high and would be good for stablecoin protocols in the ecosystem, given that a lot of the relative valuations versus income on the crypto side are actually quite low. There's this great dashboard that I recommend you check out on June Analytics. It's by DYOR Crypto. It's called Cash Cows, and it goes through the biggest revenue generators in crypto and goes through their quarterly revenue, quarterly fees, annualized fees. So if you want to track the most profitable protocols in crypto, you can see them here. Real yield is a big narrative right now off the back of Hyperliquid, which is obviously the leader right now with annualized fees of $857 million per year. Then you have Cake on BNB coming in next. The biggest stablecoin protocol is Maker. Maker looks quite strong, so this is at the top of my list. It's starting to get a pullback. This is not one I'm adding for the long term because it's already run a lot, but on the lower time frames, definitely looking to play long continuation. You have a money noodle bouncer on the 1 hourly, but by the time you're watching this, it's probably going to be a different trigger. I like the 4 hourly. Potentially after a reset, I would buy a dip here. Another one that I'm looking at is ENA. You can see on the right-hand side, I've got a little bit of a stablecoin protocol list going on. This is hard to trade because it's been so choppy and it has big unlocks, but the big unlock's actually coming tomorrow. So after that, maybe there could be a response. So there could be a little bit of a trade there as well. You've also got Syrup, which is technically an RWA protocol, but they obviously also have stablecoin pools. And I think this could be a good one. Actually, I'm seeing a lot of strong relative strength from Syrup on the market at the moment. And I actually pointed out in my Discord, it was into resistance. I drew this orange box, we tagged it. And my buy box is actually this green zone on the mid-range here at 38. So this might be something that I add very, very soon. And we might actually see confluence with the money noodle on the 4-hour, which it actually adhered to quite well in terms of structure on the way up. It flipped structure, reclaimed, and might come down for a bullish retest, which is something that I'll monitor, targeting probably range high again. Look, if Bitcoin dumped to 100K, remember I discussed that as a scenario, then I'd be looking at high time frame, long-term accumulation. So if I'd buy here, if Bitcoin starts dumping, I'll probably cut here and target the 32-cent level. That would be an amazing zone for a long-term, bigger spot position on syrup. So that's one that I'm looking at accumulating. Pendle I also really like. If you look at the 4-hour, also looks quite good with a reclaim of the money noodle. Like, this is one lower time frame you can trade, but definitely be prepared to be invalidated in the short term and look at some higher time frame accumulation levels if Bitcoin retraces. You have to have kind of two frameworks at the moment. Sorry, I'm so low on my camera. I need to put my camera down. But I have two frameworks at the moment because, I've got my lower time frame plan where, I'm willing to cut quite quick. And then I have my higher time frame plan, which is pretty much only reserved for big dips in the market if we do get them. FXS is another proxy to look into. Fluid is another one. This is a good one to accumulate spot, I think, long term. I'd just be willing to cut super quick if it broke below that 3.8 region. You guys will notice, even with a lot of my longer term plays right now, I still have invalidations. That's just because this cycle is very different from other cycles. You have to treat altcoins more like trades than blind investments if you do want to protect downside. And the number one way to make money in crypto is to stay in the game. Hence why we set invalidations in the market. Another one that's coming down on the daily money noodle to test support right now is ASF. This is a new protocol that launched. I think this is also a good proxy for the stablecoin narrative on Ethereum. I think this one can do quite well mid to long term. Obviously, in the short term, you want to use pullbacks to your advantage to be able to accumulate. On the daily right now, we have a retest of the money noodle and a stochastic RSI reset. So that's one of my lower to mid cap plays in the stablecoin narrative. And Aave is another one that's on my list, but it's kind of a bit boring. So I just tend to trade this one on perps, and I'm not doing too much in the spot department on Aave. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about Hyperliquid. We did have a dip last week. It has responded quite nicely. If we do get a pullback into this money noodle around 29 to 30, I would be a big buyer of Hyperliquid. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are thinking the same. So we just have to be patient, and we'll get our entries eventually if you missed Hyperliquid. I mean, I already got entries at 8, 11, 15, around 30 as well. Somewhere in the 20s as well. I've forgotten my exact entries, but I haven't entered since around $30. So I'd like another entry at some point, but I'm just waiting for a pullback on Hyperliquid. But I think the flywheel is very strong. As Alo points out here, the bigger the market cap of hype, the bigger the potential airdrops later. It becomes impossible for any trader to ignore the larger the rewards get. More traders join, more volume flows, more fees generated, which leads to ever increasing buy pressure on hype through buybacks leading to more speculation. Another thing that you can look out for, this is a bit of alpha for you, look into some of the PumpFun protocols in Hyperliquid. I know there's like Hyperfun, Liquid Launch HL, there's a few. Go research them because there is this whole narrative now, Hyperliquid potentially having a PumpFun competitor, and with some of the attention going away from Solana and the revenue there drying up and a lot of the attention going to Hyperliquid, that could potentially be an opportunity. So I mean, I think with Hyper EVM and all the liquidity that's on chain, there's huge potential for a meme runner on Hyperliquid. So that's also something that I'm paying a lot of attention to. So if you're locked in the markets, and I'm always locked in because there's always opportunity in the markets, look at Hyperliquid's PumpFun protocols and look at some of the new launches, see if any of those meme coins are gaining traction, because I think we will see one or two runners in that department as well. If you're airdrop farming, you're probably already in the ecosystem. Hope you enjoyed today's video. To summarize, not bearish on Sol long term, but I do think there could be a bit of a rotation and weakness in the short to mid-term off the back of PumpFun's launch, which now you know my thoughts on, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Make sure to subscribe for daily crypto alpha. See you in the next one. Peace out.